Manipulation in relationships is subtle, often hidden under the guise of affection or concern. What you must recognize is that manipulation is fundamentally about control. It's about making you act according to another's desires, often at the expense of your own well-being. The key to stopping manipulation is recognizing the signs early. The sooner you identify the behavior, the sooner you can regain control. Manipulation at its core is one of the most complex and harmful forms of control. It's often so subtle that it's not immediately noticeable, and its insidious nature makes it difficult to identify early on. Manipulators don't always use forceful, overt tactics to assert control. Instead, they deploy a variety of psychological strategies that make you second-guess yourself and place the focus on meeting their needs. The art of manipulation lies in gradually shifting the power dynamic so that you find yourself compromising more and more until you no longer know where your needs begin and theirs end. The reason begins slowly. In the beginning, manipulation can feel like a small adjustment in the relationship. Things feel off, but you can't quite put your finger on why. Manipulators are not immediately aggressive. They use subtle shifts, small comments, or clever ways of making you feel responsible for their happiness or emotional state. The more time you spend with them, the more this dynamic becomes entrenched, and the harder it becomes to break free from the influence they've exerted over you. By then, you may feel obligated to keep adjusting to their needs, wondering if you're doing enough, or constantly trying to please them. Recognizing manipulation is all about tuning into how these small shifts in behavior make you feel. If you often find yourself feeling guilty, anxious, or uncertain about your relationship, it may be a sign that manipulation is at play. These feelings are the emotional consequences of being subtly pushed and prodded into a pattern of behavior that benefits the manipulator, often at the cost of your own emotional well-being. Manipulators use tactics like guilt tripping or passive-aggressive behavior to create an atmosphere where you feel responsible for their emotions, even if they're not explicitly saying so. The imbalance in the relationship becomes more evident over time. At first, it may seem innocent enough, but soon you'll start noticing that you're always giving while they're always taking, and make constant demands on your time, energy, or attention. And no matter how much you give, it never feels like it's enough. This imbalance can be disguised as affection or care, but it is really about creating a one-sided dynamic. You'll feel as though you're the one who has to work harder, constantly adjusting and bending over backward to meet their expectations. And this is what people all around the world are doing, and this is what frustrates us. Dependency is used dependency as one of their key tools. They may seem to require constant attention, support, or validation, making you feel like you're the only one who can meet their emotional needs. Over time, this sense of emotional dependency increases, and before you know it, you're doing most of the emotional labor in the relationship. This could look like you always being the one to reach out, check in, or fix any problems that arises every time. And I tell you, as a healthcare professional, that sense of powerlessness is the most painful to bear. Meanwhile, their response to your needs is minimal or non-existent. They may promise to support you, but their actions rarely align with their words. As this dependency grows, it creates a sense of emotional imbalance. You're always giving, and they're always taking. The more this happens, the more you may start to question your own feelings. If you're constantly trying to meet their emotional needs, but your needs are constantly ignored or dismissed, it's an indicator that the relationship is not reciprocal. This imbalance, over time, begins to wear you down. It can lead to feelings of exhaustion, frustration, or even resentment. But since the manipulator often works in such subtle ways, you may find it difficult to recognize what's happening or why you're feeling drained. Your emotional responses, however, are often the most accurate indicators of manipulation. If you feel constantly guilty for not doing enough, or if you feel like you're always on edge trying to please them, then something is off. Manipulators often play on your emotions, pushing your boundaries just a little bit at a time. until you find yourself unable to distinguish where their needs end and yours begin. It's a strategy designed to make you question your own feelings and instincts, making you believe that you're the one who is responsible for the imbalance. The more aware you become of your emotional state, the easier it will be to recognize manipulation. Manipulators may subtly criticize you, make you feel like you're never good enough, or constantly find fault with things you do. They might say things like, "You don't understand me," or "Why can't you just get it right?" These statements are designed to make you feel as though you're the one at fault, even when the issue lies with them. The more you accept this blame, the more they take advantage of your emotional generosity. Manipulation can be so subtle that it takes time for you to realize what's happening. You may think that you're just being considerate, or that you're doing the right thing by continually trying to make the other person happy. But when it becomes a consistent pattern, it's crucial to step back and examine whether your actions are truly in your best interest, or if you've been manipulated into acting according to someone else's needs. Manipulators rely on their ability to manipulate emotions because emotions often overpower logic. They know how to trigger your sense of empathy, guilt, or responsibility, and they use these emotions to control your actions. Recognizing this manipulation early is essential because it allows you to protect yourself from the gradual erosion of your boundaries. Once you acknowledge that manipulation is occurring, you can begin to take steps to regain control of the situation. In summary, the first step in dealing with manipulation is recognizing it. Manipulation can be subtle, and it often operates over time, so it's important to pay attention to how it makes you feel. If you feel constantly drained, responsible for someone else's happiness, or unsure about your own emotional state, it's time to take a step back and reassess the dynamic. The key is to trust your feelings and listen to your emotional responses. They are often the clearest indicators that something is off. Recognizing manipulation allows you to protect yourself from further emotional harm and begin to set boundaries that will help restore balance in the relationship. Guilt is one of the most powerful emotional tools a manipulator can use to gain control over another person. It taps directly into the innate human sense of responsibility and empathy, making it incredibly effective, yet difficult to recognize at first. The manipulation may not always be obvious. In fact, it can be so subtle that you may not realize you're being manipulated until you're deep into the cycle. The manipulator knows that people, especially those who care deeply about others, can be easily influenced when guilt is involved. They use guilt to force you into doing things that benefit them, things you might not have otherwise agreed to, or things that violate your own boundaries. Two, one of the key features of guilt-based manipulation is that the manipulator rarely makes overt demands. Instead, they rely on your emotions to do the work for them. They'll often say things like, "If you truly cared about me, you'd do this," or "I can't believe you'd do this to me after everything I've done for you." These statements aren't meant to be logical. They're designed to appeal to your emotions, to make you feel responsible for their feelings or well-being. The manipulator wants to make you feel guilty for not fulfilling their expectations, even if those expectations are unreasonable or unfair. It starts innocently enough. Maybe it's a minor complaint about something that could have been handled better, or a casual remark about something you didn't do. But over time, this guilt manipulation escalates. The manipulator may begin to push you into positions where you feel morally obligated to act in their favor, no matter what it cost you. At first, you may feel sorry for them, but this initial empathy can quickly turn into guilt. And once that guilt has taken root, the manipulator continues to exploit it to further their control. Guilt manipulation is particularly effective because it makes you feel like you are the one who is at fault. You start to believe that you are responsible for their happiness, that your actions, or lack thereof, are the reason for their distress. You begin to question yourself, your choices, and your behavior. You might apologize repeatedly for things that aren't even your fault, all because you feel that their unhappiness is a reflection of something you did or didn't do. Over time, this manipulation erodes your sense of self-worth and independence. The more you give in to the manipulator's demands, the more they expect. Eventually, you may find yourself in a one-sided relationship where you're always giving, but they're always taking. This imbalance doesn't just create frustration. It fosters resentment, confusion, and even self-doubt. You may begin to feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid the next guilt trip. You become so focused on their feelings that you forget about your own needs and desires. The manipulator's weaponized guilt isn't always so direct. They often disguise it as concern or love, making it difficult to distinguish between genuine care and emotional coercion. A manipulator may say things like, "I'm only doing this because I care about you," or "You don't understand how hard this is for me." These statements are intended to make you feel bad for not accommodating them. They're designed to convince you that you owe them something, even when they haven't done anything to deserve it.
Yeah.
This emotional tactic works because it plays on deep-seated feelings of guilt, responsibility, and empathy that we've all been conditioned to uphold. People who are empathetic by nature are often the easiest targets for guilt manipulation because they feel compelled to help, to give, and to care. Manipulators prey on this tendency, often without ever being overtly aggressive. A particularly damaging form of guilt manipulation is when the manipulator uses guilt as a way to undermine your confidence and self-esteem. They may make subtle comments that make you question your actions or your worth. Statements like, "I can't believe you'd do this to me," or "You don't care about me at all," are designed to plant seeds of doubt in your mind. The goal is to make you feel so guilty that you forget your own value. Eventually, you begin to internalize these feelings of guilt and responsibility, even when the manipulator's accusations are completely unfounded. One of the most important aspects of detaching from guilt manipulation is recognizing that the manipulator's emotional state is not your responsibility. You are not responsible for their happiness, their comfort, or their emotional stability. While it's natural to care for others, especially those we love, you must recognize when you are being asked to carry an emotional burden that is not yours to bear. When someone manipulates you through guilt, they are shifting the responsibility of their feelings onto you, making you the emotional caretaker in the relationship. This dynamic isn't healthy, and it's important to set boundaries to protect your emotional well-being. A key way to detach from guilt manipulation is to stop justifying yourself. When a manipulator uses guilt to control you, they're expecting you to rationalize your actions in a way that makes them feel justified in their demands. If you continue to explain why you can't do something or why you didn't act the way they expected, you're inadvertently reinforcing their manipulation. The more you justify yourself, the more they have control over the situation. Instead, simply acknowledging their feelings without taking responsibility for them can help break the cycle of guilt. Another essential step in detaching from guilt manipulation is learning to set and maintain strong boundaries. When someone manipulates you through guilt, they are essentially pushing you to violate your own limits. Whether it's overstepping physical, emotional, or mental boundaries, manipulators want you to feel that their needs come first, no matter what. By asserting your boundaries and refusing to apologize for them, you take back control. You have every right to say no to unreasonable requests, and you don't need to feel guilty for doing so. I quote, "The process of setting boundaries begins with recognizing your own needs. Take time to reflect on what you are willing to give and what you aren't. Ask yourself whether the demands being made are fair or whether they're based on unrealistic expectations. If the manipulator is asking for more than you can reasonably provide, that's an immediate sign that the manipulation is taking place. Practice saying no when you need to. It may feel uncomfortable at first, but over time, it will become easier. Another important step in breaking free from guilt manipulation is understanding that you do not owe anyone an explanation for every decision you make. You do not need to justify your actions or your choices, especially when the other person's emotional reaction is not your responsibility. Manipulators thrive on this need for explanation because it gives them power over your decisions. The more you feeding into their manipulation, Additionally, building emotional resilience is a crucial part of detaching from guilt manipulation. The more emotionally resilient you become, the less susceptible you will be to the guilt the manipulator tries to impose on you. Resilience doesn't mean shutting down emotionally. Rather, it means being able to recognize when guilt is being used as a tool to control you and refusing to let it dominate your behavior. In the end, the key to detaching from guilt manipulation is taking back control of your own emotions and actions. By recognizing the manipulator's tactics, asserting your boundaries, and refusing to engage with their guilt-inducing behavior, you can break free from this unhealthy dynamic. It's not easy, and it may take time, but with practice, you can reclaim your emotional well-being and move toward healthier, more balanced relationships. Manipulators often wield fear as a potent tool to keep others under their control. One of the most common fears they exploit is the fear of abandonment. They recognize that the threat of losing someone can be one of the most emotionally destabilizing experiences a person can face. This fear, deeply rooted in our human need for connection, becomes an easy target for manipulation. Phrases like, "If you leave me, I'll be lost," or "You're going to regret this," are designed to trigger that fear and keep you tethered to them, even if it means compromising your own happiness or well-being. They create a false sense of impending loss, knowing that the threat of abandonment can cloud your judgment and force you into compliance. Do manipulators understand human nature better than most? They know that people tend to fear the unknown, particularly the loss of important relationships. By exaggerating or fabricating the consequences of leaving or standing up to them, they create a narrative where your departure is framed as disastrous, both for them and for you. They may even make it seem like you're abandoning them in their time of need, or that they will fall apart without you. And so they try and distract or repress their distress. And the manipulation here is clear. The fear of loss is used to keep you emotionally invested and obedient to their wishes. Now, the danger of this tactic lies in how it can distort your decision-making. Instead of making choices based on your needs, desires, and principles, you may begin to make decisions based on the fear of what will happen if you leave or reject the manipulator. This fear may not only be about the relationship, but also about the consequences of their potential emotional reaction. You might worry about how they will feel, how they will cope, or how others might perceive you. The manipulator knows how to use these fears to create a cycle of dependency, where you feel compelled to stay and conform to their wishes in order to avoid the perceived devastation of abandoning them. However, fear should never be the guiding principle in any relationship, nor should it dictate your behavior. Fear is inherently irrational. It often exaggerates or distorts the reality of a situation. The manipulator's use of fear is designed to create a false sense of urgency, leading you to make decisions you wouldn't otherwise make if you were able to think clearly and without emotional coercion. The fear they instill is based on their own need for control, not on the actual consequences of your actions. To counteract the manipulator's use of fear, the first step is recognizing it for what it is, a power tactic. Fear, particularly when it comes to the fear of abandonment, can seem overwhelming, but it is important to remind yourself that the fear is being used to manipulate you, not to guide you toward any rational or healthy decision. Once you acknowledge that the fear is being weaponized, you can start to take steps to detach from it. One of the most effective ways to neutralize the power of fear is to confront it directly. Rather than avoiding the fear or letting it dictate your actions, face it head on. Ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen if I were to leave or assert my boundaries? Is it as catastrophic as the manipulator suggests? In most cases, you'll find that the consequences are nowhere near as dire as the manipulator makes them out to be. In fact, you may even find that your decision to stand firm in your principles and leave the manipulator behind leads to greater freedom, peace of mind, and healthier relationships in the future. Well, maybe once things start to warm up and you actually start learning to see things happening in life, It's crucial to make decisions based on your values, not on the fear of what might happen. Ask yourself what is truly important to you. Are you willing to sacrifice your own happiness, autonomy, and well-being just to avoid making the manipulator upset or to avoid leaving them? Often manipulators will play on your sense of guilt, obligation, or fear of their emotional reaction. But those feelings are not an adequate basis for making life-altering decisions. Another strategy for dealing with fear-based manipulation is to take a step back and remove yourself from the situation temporarily. Sometimes the best way to break free from fear is to create physical and emotional distance from the manipulator. This allows you to think more clearly and objectively without the manipulator's constant emotional pull. Distance creates space for your own thoughts and feelings to resurface, helping you reconnect with your true desires and values. In that Zanza kind of an example of in this space, you can start to make decisions that are aligned with your own best interests rather than decisions driven by fear of what the manipulator might do or feel. So remember, fear is not a rational basis for decision making. It thrives on uncertainty and emotional manipulation, and it's designed to keep you stuck in a cycle of dependence and compliance. The more you allow fear to control your decisions, the more power the manipulator has over you. However, when you refuse to let fear dictate your actions and instead make control of your life and your relationships, you take back control of your life and your relationships. This process can take time and emotional strength, especially if the manipulator has been controlling you through fear for a long period. However, the more you practice making decisions that are rooted in your own values and needs, the easier it becomes to recognize fear manipulation for what it is. You begin to see that fear is not a reflection of reality, but a tool used to create a false sense of threat. Once you recognize this, you can make decisions that lead to a healthier, more authentic life, one that is not ruled by the fear of what might happen, but by the confidence of knowing you are in control. Ultimately, the fear that manipulators try to instill in you is not about your well-being or your happiness. It is about their control over you. They know that if they can create enough fear, you will be less likely to challenge their behavior, question their motives, or leave the relationship. The key to breaking free from this manipulation is to refuse to let fear make your decisions for you. Instead, embrace a mindset of clarity, confidence, and self-awareness. Trust in your ability to make decisions that are best for you, even when the manipulator tries to convince you that you will regret it or that you are wrong for doing so. But when you stop allowing fear to control your actions, you reclaim your autonomy, you become free from the manipulator's grip, and you can begin to build a life based on your own values, desires, and boundaries. Fear may have once held you captive, but with time and effort, you can learn to face it, understand it, and ultimately transcend it. So you talked about by facing fear directly, refusing to let it dictate your actions, and making decisions based on your own principles, you free yourself from the emotional manipulation that seeks to control you. Manipulation in relationships is subtle yet powerful. It often masquerades as care, concern, or even love. A manipulator will present themselves as someone who is always looking out for you, but beneath this surface lies an intention to control your thoughts, actions, and emotions. They'll tell you things like, "I'm just looking out for you," or "I just want the best for you," but the true intent is far less innocent. These statements are designed to make you feel as though their desires and actions are in your best interest, even when they may not be. But you have to ask yourself, is that my Noma? Is that what I really want? The problem is that in reality, manipulation is never about mutual care or love. It's about maintaining dominance in the relationship. A manipulator will exploit your vulnerability, often using guilt, fear, or a sense of duty to coerce you into compliance. Their words are crafted to make you feel responsible for their happiness or well-being, making it increasingly difficult for you to differentiate between what you truly want and what they're imposing on you. Over time, this can erode your sense of self, causing you to prioritize their needs over your own. The manipulative behavior can feel as if you're being constantly pulled in different directions, uncertain of whether your choices are truly yours or the result of their influence. One common tactic manipulators use is guilt. They will often phrase things in a way that implies if you truly cared about them, you would comply with their wishes. They may make you feel as though you are morally obligated to fulfill their needs, even if doing so is to your detriment. I've done so much for you, and this is how you repay me. Or, you know how much this means to me. Don't you care? This kind of guilt is designed to wear you down emotionally, leading you to make decisions not based on your own desires, but on the sense of duty they've cultivated. What often goes unnoticed is that this manipulation undermines your autonomy. Manipulators are adept at positioning themselves as the center of attention. And through subtle tactics, they ensure that all decisions within the relationship are filtered through their lens. They dictate the terms, control the pace, and often isolate you from external influences that might give you perspective. The idea of shared decision-making becomes skewed, with them taking the lead in nearly every aspect, from minor details to major life decisions. Over time, you might start to believe that you don't have the right to assert your own preferences, that your needs aren't as important, or that you're somehow not entitled to independence within the relationship. When you begin to realize that the balance in the relationship has shifted, it's crucial to recognize the signs of control. A healthy relationship is built on mutual respect, understanding, and compromise. However, in a manipulative dynamic, one person is constantly calling the shots. This can manifest in a variety of ways. They may choose where to go, what to do, or even how to spend your time. They may expect you to always be available for them. Or they might make decisions for you without consulting your opinion or considering your desires. This lack of mutual respect and reciprocal effort is a clear sign that the relationship has become one-sided. The person doing the manipulating may try to justify their actions by claiming they are doing what's best for you, or that their decisions are for your own good. But in reality, these justifications are a cover for their need to dominate the relationship. Their actions are not about mutual care. They are about control, defensive salvage mode. But for the financial advantage, it comes at the more you allow this to happen, the more you relinquish your personal power and sense of self. Your autonomy, your ability to make decisions, and your right to choose for yourself are crucial aspects of any healthy relationship. Without these elements, you risk becoming enmeshed in a dynamic where your individuality is constantly undermined. Manipulators thrive in environments where the other person feels guilty or obliged to comply. But when you recognize these patterns and assert your own boundaries, you take back control. You are not responsible for the emotional well-being of the other person, and you are entitled to pursue your own desires and needs. Recognizing when you are being controlled can be difficult, especially if the manipulator is someone you care about or trust. They may present their actions as selfless or as a form of caring, but true care is not about dominance. True care respects boundaries and encourages independence, growth, and mutual benefit. If your relationship feels more like a power struggle than a partnership, it's important to step back and assess the dynamic. One way to start recognizing control is by reflecting on how you feel in the relationship. Do you feel constantly drained or conflicted? Are your needs ignored in favor of theirs? Do you often find yourself compromising your values or desires just to keep the peace? These are all indicators that manipulation is at play. When you feel uncertain or uncomfortable in a relationship, it's often because your autonomy is being compromised. Once you've identified that you're being controlled, the next step is to reclaim your independence. Set clear boundaries and make sure those boundaries are respected. Understand that it's okay to say no, to have different opinions, and to make decisions without seeking constant approval. If you're in a situation where you feel like your autonomy is consistently undermined, it may be time to reconsider the relationship or take a step back to regain your sense of self. Establishing boundaries is not an easy process, particularly in a manipulative relationship, but it is necessary. Boundaries are the foundation of self-respect and the safeguard of your well-being. You have the right to choose what you allow into your life and what you will not tolerate. It's important to remember that asserting your autonomy is not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-preservation. You are not obligated to sacrifice your personal needs or desires to maintain someone else's comfort or sense of control. Never settle for anything until it's acceptable. Autonomy is the ability to make choices based on your own needs, desires, and principles, without feeling manipulated or coerced. It's about respecting yourself enough to take ownership of your life and your decisions. A relationship should enrich both individuals, allowing each person to grow, pursue their passions, and be their authentic selves. If one person is constantly dominating, it not only diminishes your ability to grow, but also creates an unhealthy, imbalanced dynamic that can harm both parties in the long run. In the end, the key to recognizing and overcoming manipulation lies in understanding your own worth and maintaining your sense of self. A manipulator's goal is to blur the lines of respect and independence, making you feel as though your needs are secondary to theirs. When you reclaim your autonomy and refuse to allow them to dominate your life, you regain control over your decisions, your emotions, and your relationships. You deserve to be in a partnership where both individuals are free to make choices that align with their values and goals. Manipulation thrives on the absence of boundaries. So the more you establish and protect yours, the less power the manipulator will have over you. Another form of manipulation that's often employed in toxic relationships is when someone makes you feel as though you're the only one capable of fulfilling their emotional needs. They may say things like, "You're the only person who understands me," or "I don't know what I would do without you." This tactic is designed to place an immense amount of emotional pressure on you. It makes you feel indispensable, as if their emotional well-being hinges entirely on your actions, support, and presence. On the surface, these statements may sound flattering as they appeal to your sense of importance and desire to be loved. However, the underlying message, it creates an unhealthy emotional dependency. When someone continuously relies on you for their happiness, it creates a lopsided dynamic where you become responsible for their emotions, needs, and sometimes even their sense of purpose. This kind of manipulation not only burdens you emotionally, but can also erode your mental and emotional well-being. Manipulators thrive on making you feel like the only person who can offer them the understanding, love, or support they crave. They make it seem as though no one else could possibly take your place. This tactic can be very powerful, especially if the manipulator is someone you care deeply for, or if they've painted themselves as vulnerable or emotionally fragile. In these cases, the pressure to always be there for them can become overwhelming, causing you to prioritize their needs above your own. Over time, this can result in a loss of your own identity as you begin to neglect your own needs and desires in favor of their emotional well-being. The problem with this form of manipulation is that it fosters emotional dependency, which is inherently unhealthy. In a healthy relationship, both partners are interdependent, meaning they rely on each other for support, love, and care, but they also have the emotional capacity to stand alone when necessary. It's about balance. Neither person is solely responsible for the other's happiness. Instead, both individuals should contribute to the relationship while also maintaining a sense of independence and personal emotional well-being. When you're made to feel like someone's emotional state is entirely dependent on you, it creates an impossible situation. You may feel trapped, constantly walking on eggshells, worried that any misstep could result in their emotional turmoil. This is a form of emotional manipulation that wears you down over time, leading to feelings of guilt, anxiety, and exhaustion. You might even begin to believe that you are the only person capable of making them happy, which can be a dangerous illusion. The reality is that everyone has the responsibility to manage their own emotional well-being. You are not their therapist, emotional caretaker, or sole source of happiness. The best way to handle this situation is to set clear boundaries. Recognize that you are not responsible for their emotions. You can offer support, love, and care, but it is not your responsibility to carry the weight of their happiness. By constantly placing the burden of their emotional stability on your shoulders, they are asking you to give more than is healthy or sustainable. Over time, this can lead to burnout and resentment, as the balance of the relationship is skewed in their favor. In any relationship, it is crucial to maintain a sense of emotional independence. You need to take care of your own emotional well-being and ensure that your partner does the same. If one person is constantly relying on the other for emotional support, it can create an imbalance where one partner feels drained, overwhelmed, and perhaps even resentful. This emotional dependency can be just as damaging as other forms of manipulation because it prevents both individuals from growing and maintaining a healthy sense of self. And so I think it's right that somebody breaks the habit of being unprotected by their partner. To avoid falling into this trap, it's important to recognize when this manipulation is happening. If you notice that the other person frequently says things like, "No one else understands me the way you do," or "I can't live without you," it may be a sign that they are trying to emotionally manipulate you into feeling indispensable. These statements may evoke sympathy or a desire to help, but it's essential to remember that they are designed to make you feel responsible for their emotional state. It's also helpful to evaluate your own emotional boundaries. Are you constantly feeling responsible for their feelings? Do you find yourself sacrificing your own needs to ensure they are okay? If so, it's time to take a step back and assess whether the relationship is healthy. Healthy relationships should allow for mutual care and support, but they should never be based on one person's emotional needs dominating the other. So that's the best way to protect yourself. Taking control of your own emotional well-being is crucial. Set clear boundaries and make it known that while you care for them, you are not responsible for their happiness or emotional state. They need to take ownership of their emotions, just as you do. If they are unable to manage their emotions independently, it's a sign that they need to seek support elsewhere, whether through friends, family, or professional help. If ever, ultimately, it's important to recognize that a relationship should be a partnership, not a one-sided emotional support system. You should both be able to lean on each other, but neither of you should be carrying the full weight of the other's emotional burdens. In healthy relationships, both partners are able to maintain their individuality while also supporting each other. The key is to find balance. Both people should contribute to the relationship and offer emotional support, but no one person should feel as though they are responsible for the other's emotional well-being. If you feel that your partner is emotionally dependent on you to the point where it's unhealthy, it's essential to address the issue. Set boundaries and make it clear that while you care about them, you cannot be their sole source of emotional stability. Encourage them to find other support sources and work on maintaining their emotional health independently. Only then can the relationship become truly balanced, with both individuals offering support while also maintaining their emotional independence. Some manipulators thrive on drama and chaos, using these tactics to maintain control over the situation. They may deliberately stir conflict or create turmoil, often without a clear reason other than to keep you emotionally engaged. These manipulations serve as a diversion, distracting you from their true intentions or desires. The ongoing chaos keeps you prioritize their emotional needs over your own. The emotional energy that you would otherwise spend on maintaining your own well-being is instead siphoned off, leaving you caught up in their drama. This behavior is not about resolving issues or having open, healthy discussions. It's about keeping you emotionally invested in the turbulence. Conflict can be a manipulative tool designed to provoke an emotional response from you. The manipulator wants you to feel responsible for the situation, believing that you must fix it or provide emotional support. They want you to react, whether by comforting them, trying to solve the issue, or becoming angry or upset yourself. In this way, they keep you distracted, focused on the emotional fallout instead of the manipulation happening beneath the surface. When someone manipulates through conflict, it's often subtle at first. They might introduce small disagreements or make exaggerated complaints about something minor. Over time, the stakes get higher and they create larger emotional disturbances, making you feel like everything is falling apart. They will frequently play the victim role, framing themselves as the person who's being wronged, thus putting you in the position of defender, savior, or problem solver. It's a calculated way to ensure that you remain emotionally connected and that the focus stays on them, right? One of the most damaging aspects of conflict manipulation is that it robs you of your peace. You find yourself constantly on edge, wondering what will trigger the next eruption. This emotional roller coaster becomes exhausting, draining you of energy and leaving you unable to focus on your own needs. As you become more involved in the drama, you may lose sight of what's truly important in your own life, from your personal goals to the relationships you've built with others. The manipulator wants to keep you in this state where their needs take precedence over your own, so that you remain emotionally dependent on them. And the most effective way to handle this type of manipulation is to step back and detach yourself from the drama. You need to regain control over your emotions by refusing to get pulled into the conflict. Emotional detachment isn't about being cold or indifferent. Rather, it's about protecting your mental and emotional well-being. When you refuse to engage with the drama, you effectively break the cycle of manipulation. You no longer give them the emotional energy they need to maintain control over you. To successfully disengage from the conflict, you need to set clear boundaries. This means recognizing when a situation is escalating into manipulation and choosing not to participate. You don't need to explain yourself or justify your decision to step away. Simply removing yourself from the situation can be enough to prevent the manipulator from gaining any further emotional leverage. The key is to stay calm and composed, ensuring that your emotions don't get caught up in the drama they're trying to create. One important strategy to avoid being dragged into the chaos is to avoid engaging with the manipulator when they're emotionally charged. This means not reacting impulsively to their outbursts, whether they are angry, upset, or trying to provoke you into an argument. The manipulator will often try to bait you, using emotional triggers or personal insults to get a reaction. By staying calm and composed, you deny them the satisfaction of a response, which weakens their control over the situation. If the manipulator tries to provoke you further by accusing you of being indifferent or unsupportive, resist the urge to defend yourself. This is a classic tactic designed to make you feel guilty for not engaging. Instead of explaining your decision to step away, simply state that you're not going to engage in the conflict. You can express your desire for calm, respectful communication and let them know that you're not willing to participate in their emotional games. Setting these boundaries is crucial in breaking free from their control. Tell them it's not real. Serve themselves. Keep your focus on the bigger picture. Remind yourself that the manipulator is trying to distract you from the truth. They don't want you to see the manipulation for what it is, so they create turmoil to keep you off balance. By staying emotionally detached and refusing to get caught up in the drama, you protect your ability to see things clearly. You can focus on what truly matters in your life, your goals, your values, and the relationships that are healthy and fulfilling. The manipulator's need for chaos should no longer be your priority. Another important aspect of disengaging from the drama is practicing emotional self-care. Manipulators will often try to provoke you until you're emotionally drained, so it's essential to make sure you have the tools to recover and stay strong. Taking time for yourself, whether through meditation, physical exercise, or spending time with supportive people, will help you maintain your emotional resilience. When you invest in your own well-being, you're less likely to be drawn into emotional manipulation and more likely to handle difficult situations with calmness and clarity. Furthermore, when you detach from the drama, you also create space for healthier dynamics. Relationships that are based on mutual respect and understanding are rarely filled with constant conflict or emotional turmoil. By stepping away from the manipulator's games, you give yourself the opportunity to engage with people who value peace, communication, and trust. You can focus on nurturing relationships that lift you up instead of keeping you stuck in a cycle of manipulation and chaos. Ultimately, refusing to engage in the manipulator's drama is an act of reclaiming control over your emotional life. By choosing not to participate in the conflict, you prevent them from using your emotions to maintain their power. This allows you to preserve your peace of mind and invest in relationships that are based on trust and mutual support rather than manipulating and turmoil. Remember, you don't need to be involved in the drama. By withdrawing emotionally and refusing to engage, you break the cycle and protect your own well-being. The silent treatment is a classic and often insidious manipulation tactic used by manipulators to control and dominate the relationship dynamic. By withdrawing and intentionally ignoring you, the manipulator creates a void, and it is in this space of silence that they attempt to assert control. The aim is not just to make you feel ignored, but to push you into a position where you are the one scrambling for attention and approval. The manipulator wants to make you question your actions, doubt your worth, and ultimately chase after their validation. The silent treatment is not just about silence. It's about using that silence as a powerful tool to evoke emotional responses from you. It creates an environment of uncertainty and discomfort where you're left wondering what went wrong, why they're upset, or what you can do to make things right. This creates an emotional imbalance where the manipulator holds the upper hand, knowing you'll start trying to fix things. They thrive on this power dynamic, using your desire for connection and validation to control you. And faced with the silent treatment, the most common reaction is to seek them out and try to resolve the situation, often by apologizing or attempting to make them open up. However, this response is exactly what the manipulator wants. They want you to chase them, beg for their attention, and reassure them of your commitment or affection. The more you chase, the more you feed into their power, reinforcing the idea that their silence holds control over your emotional state. It's important to understand that the silent treatment is not a mature or healthy way to deal with conflict. In a healthy relationship, open communication is key. When someone withdraws into silence, they are refusing to engage in meaningful dialogue and are essentially creating emotional distance as a form of manipulation. They may claim to be upset or hurt, but in reality, the silence is a calculated tactic designed to make you question your actions and seek your approval. One of the best ways to deal with the silent treatment is to recognize it for what it truly is, a form of emotional manipulation. When you stop chasing after the manipulator, you take away the power they have over you. You stop engaging in their emotional games and instead focus on maintaining your own emotional balance. Remember, silence is not an appropriate or mature response to any relationship issue. It's a tactic designed to make you feel inadequate and keep you on edge. Instead of chasing them or begging for their attention, it's essential to maintain your composure. This means not giving in to the temptation to reach out, apologize unnecessarily, or beg for their forgiveness. In doing so, you maintain your dignity and assert your own boundaries. The manipulator will often try to test these boundaries, hoping that you will break down and give in. But by standing firm in your resolve, you show them that their tactic is ineffective. The key to handling the silent treatment is emotional self-regulation. When the manipulator withdraws, they want you to feel anxious, uncertain, and dependent on their approval. But by keeping your emotions in check and refusing to react impulsively, you regain control. Focus on maintaining your peace of mind and don't let their silence dictate your emotional state. Take this time to assess the relationship, reflect on your boundaries, and remind yourself of your own worth. If you feel tempted to reach out or apologize to end the silence, ask yourself why you feel this way. Is it because you genuinely want to resolve the issue, or is it because you're afraid of their rejection? Often, the manipulator will use this fear against you, knowing that you're more likely to chase after them when you feel vulnerable. Recognizing the underlying motivations behind your own impulses can help you break free from the cycle of manipulation. And that is why it's all about the passion. Another important aspect is understanding that silence doesn't solve the problem. If there's an issue in the relationship, ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It only prolongs the discomfort. In some cases, the manipulator may use silence to avoid confronting the issue at hand, hoping that you'll simply give up and let things slide. But refusing to engage with their silence, you stop allowing the manipulator to control the narrative. This is not a silent problem. They have a trust issue and they are acting out their resentment. By standing firm in your boundaries, you also set the tone for future interactions. If the manipulator realizes that their silence no longer has the desired effect of drawing you in, they may be forced to either open up and address the issue or let the relationship drift. Either way, the dynamic has shifted and you are no longer the one chasing after them. It's also crucial to recognize that manipulation through silence isn't about fixing the relationship. It's about power. The manipulator may not care about resolving the issue, but rather about ensuring that you remain in a position of emotional subjugation. By refusing to chase, you take away their power and return the control back to yourself. Additionally, when you refuse to engage with the manipulator's silence, you protect your own emotional health. Prolonged exposure to this tactic can create feelings of isolation, frustration, and anxiety. By not reacting to their silent treatment, you shield yourself from the emotional harm it can cause. This gives you the space to regain clarity and focus on what truly matters, your own well-being. Ultimately, when you recognize the silent treatment for what it is, an emotional manipulation tactic, you free yourself from its control. You stop feeding into the manipulator's power dynamic and instead choose to maintain your own boundaries and emotional stability. Silence may seem like a powerful tool in the manipulator's arsenal, but by refusing to chase after them, you take back control of the relationship. You no longer allow their silence to dictate your emotional state. Instead, you remain composed and steadfast, making it clear that their manipulative tactics will not work on you. Manipulators often project their faults onto others as a strategic way to divert attention from their own behavior and deflect any accountability. This tactic allows them to avoid facing the consequences of their actions by shifting the blame onto you. In essence, they accuse you of the very things they are guilty of themselves, creating confusion and forcing you to question your own actions. For instance, a manipulator might say, "You're selfish," when in reality, they are the one consistently acting in self-serving ways. This form of projection is meant to destabilize you emotionally, making it difficult to distinguish their flaws from your own. When someone projects their faults onto you, it is a clear manipulation tactic designed to disorient and guilt-trip you into accepting responsibility for their behavior. The manipulator knows that by accusing you of something, they can cast doubt on your actions and create an emotional conflict within you. You might start wondering if you are truly selfish or if you have been inconsiderate in some way. This internal struggle makes you more susceptible to their influence than easier to control. At the core of this tactic is the manipulator's desire to control the narrative and avoid facing their own shortcomings. By accusing you of selfishness, for example, they can position themselves as the victim in the situation. This shifts the focus away from their own actions, which may actually be selfish, manipulative, or hurtful. The more they accuse you, the less attention is paid to their own behavior. It's a deliberate move to keep you on the defensive, questioning your motives and actions, right? The key to handling projection is to remain grounded in your own reality. Manipulators thrive when they can cause confusion and manipulate your perception of events. If you allow their accusations to sway your confidence, you give them the power to control how you view yourself. Instead of getting caught up in their projections, it is essential to stand firm in your understanding of the situation. Trust your instincts and keep a clear sense of your own boundaries. One of the most important steps in responding to projection is to not internalize the manipulator's accusations. When someone calls you selfish or blames you for their own flaws, you must recognize it for what it is, a deflection. You are not responsible for their mistakes, shortcomings, or emotional responses. The manipulator is simply trying to control the situation by making you feel guilty for things that are not your fault. The more you understand this dynamic, the easier it becomes to separate their accusations from your reality. It can be difficult, especially when a manipulator is skilled at using projection, to remain confident in the face of their accusations. They may be persuasive and their words may feel like they carry weight. However, it is crucial to remember that their tactics are meant to manipulate and destabilize you. They are not reflecting your true nature. They are simply using projection as a shield to protect themselves from accountability. Recognizing this will help you maintain your sense of self and avoid falling into their trap. Another important aspect of handling manipulation through projection is to avoid engaging in the argument they are trying to create. Manipulators often want to drag you into a debate over whether or not you are selfish, careless, or whatever else they accuse you of. They want you to defend yourself, to explain why their accusations are false, which diverts your energy from addressing the real issue, their manipulative behavior. Thinking about these things is vital to proceed with this rigid structure that we talk about in getting sucked into this emotional back and forth. It's vital to stay calm and assertive. Simply acknowledge the accusation without getting drawn into a lengthy defense. For instance, you could respond with, "I don't agree with your perspective, and I'm not going to argue about it." This response signals that you are unwilling to engage in their manipulative tactics and that you are confident in your own reality. It's also important to set clear boundaries with someone who frequently uses projection. When you allow them to project their issues onto you, it enables the manipulator to continue their behavior. Setting boundaries means being clear about what you will and won't accept, both in terms of their behavior and how they communicate with you. If they accuse you of things you didn't do, don't allow the conversation to continue in a way that makes you feel responsible for their emotional or psychological problems. Be firm in your refusal to accept blame for things you haven't done, and make it clear that you will not tolerate being manipulated through their projections. So, at times, a manipulator may use projection to create confusion about your relationship. For instance, they might accuse you of being distant or uncaring when it is, in fact, their behavior that has caused the disconnect. They may try to reverse the narrative, suggesting that you are the one pushing them away when they have been the ones who have been emotionally unavailable or manipulative. In this case, it's important to remain grounded in your understanding of the situation. Reflect on the facts and trust your perspective. The manipulator may try to blur the lines between who is at fault, but you have the ability to maintain clarity by focusing on the truth of the situation. And if someone spurs up some or all of this, the affection is contagious. It's a signal that something is off in the marriage. No one is manipulation through projection can be particularly damaging to your self-esteem over time. When you're constantly being accused of things that aren't true, you begin to doubt your own behavior and judgment. This is a classic tactic to undermine your confidence and create an emotional dependency on the manipulator. The longer you allow this behavior to continue, the more it can erode your sense of self. That's why it's crucial to recognize the manipulator's tactics early on and take steps to protect your emotional well-being. One of the most empowering steps you can take when facing manipulation through projection is to engage in self-reflection. This means taking the time to evaluate your actions, thoughts, and emotions outside of the manipulator's influence. Are you acting in accordance with your values? Are you staying true to your boundaries? By regularly checking in with yourself, you create a solid foundation that makes it harder for manipulators to shake your confidence. Self-reflection allows you to stay connected to your own truth and resist the urge to conform to the distorted version of reality that manipulators try to create. It can also be helpful to seek support from others who can provide an outside perspective. Manipulators often isolate their targets, making it difficult for them to see the situation clearly. By talking to trusted friends or a therapist, you can gain a more objective view of the situation. These individuals can help you separate the manipulator's accusations from your actual behavior, which can be incredibly validating when you start to feel gaslighted or confused. Another way to deal with projection is to focus on actions, not words. Manipulators often use their words as weapons, but their actions will often tell a different story. Pay attention to how they behave versus what they say. If someone is constantly accusing you of being selfish, but rarely shows any consideration for your needs, that's a sign that their words are meant to confuse and manipulate, rather than to reflect the truth of the relationship. By focusing on their actions, you can gain clarity and stop internalizing their false narratives. Finally, remember that you are not responsible for the manipulator's emotional state or their actions. When someone projects their faults onto you, they are trying to shift the responsibility for their issues onto your shoulders. However, you have the right to live your life free from this kind of emotional burden. By refusing to accept blame for things that aren't yours to carry, you maintain your autonomy and protect your emotional health. Over time, standing firm in your own reality becomes an act of self-respect, and this will help you build stronger boundaries and healthier relationships moving forward. Some manipulators rely on overt aggression as a way to gain control and force compliance. Raised voices, threats, and intimidation are all methods used to instill fear and pressure you into submission. The goal of aggression is simple: to make you feel small, powerless, and to compel you to act in accordance with their demands out of fear of further escalation. This tactic can be particularly damaging because it directly targets your emotional and physical safety, making you feel unsafe and vulnerable. Aggression in its various forms is a clear indication that the manipulator is no longer attempting to persuade you through reasoning or subtle tactics. They are resorting to force. This might include loud arguments, name-calling, physical intimidation, or even threats of harm, whether physical, emotional, or social. The manipulator may try to create a scenario where they can dominate and ensuring that you feel obligated to comply simply to avoid further aggression. This dynamic often leads the victim feeling helpless, unsure of how to defend themselves, and emotionally drained. The key to dealing with overt aggression is to recognize that no one has the right to intimidate or control you in this manner. Aggressive manipulation is never acceptable, and it is vital to set clear and firm boundaries from the start. When faced with this kind of behavior, it's essential to take immediate action to protect yourself. Do not tolerate any form of verbal or physical aggression, regardless of the situation or how much the manipulator tries to justify their behavior. It is crucial to remember that the manipulator's aggression is a reflection of their inability to control the situation through healthier means. They are using fear as their weapon, but you do not have to yield to it. Setting boundaries is the first step in protecting yourself from aggressive manipulation. When aggression starts, whether verbal or physical, your response should be immediate and firm. Let the manipulator know that such behavior will not be tolerated. A calm but assertive response, such as "I will not engage with you if you continue to speak to me like this," can be enough to set the tone for what is acceptable. The key is to remain composed, not reacting out of anger or fear, but from a place of personal strength and clarity. It's essential to establish the fact that their aggression is not an effective way to communicate or get what they want. If the situation escalates and the manipulator refuses to stop, it's crucial to remove yourself from the environment. In some cases, especially if physical intimidation is involved, leaving the situation entirely may be the safest option. Distance yourself both emotionally and physically from the aggressor. This sends a clear message that you will not be manipulated by fear or intimidation. It's also important to seek support from others, whether that means talking to a trusted friend, family member, or professional. Having someone in your corner can help reaffirm that the aggression is not your fault and that you do not have to accept it. Removing yourself doesn't mean conceding defeat. On the contrary, it shows that you are unwilling to be controlled by someone's manipulative tactics. It's also a way of regaining your power, taking back control over your own actions and decisions. If necessary, you can cut ties with the aggressor entirely, especially if their behavior does not change. Long-term exposure to aggression is emotionally draining and damaging, and it's important to protect your mental and emotional health by removing toxic influences from your life. In some cases, the manipulator might attempt to guilt you into staying or accepting their aggression, perhaps by saying things like, "You're leaving me over something so small," or "I was just upset, why can't you understand?" This is part of the manipulation, trying to make you feel as if the aggression is your fault or that you should tolerate it in order to maintain the relationship. It's essential to reject this narrative. Aggression is never justified, regardless of the reason behind it. The manipulator might try to appeal to your sense of empathy, but your responsibility is to protect yourself first. Aggression can have a long-lasting psychological effect, particularly if it becomes a regular part of the dynamic. Over time, you might find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid triggering the aggressor's outbursts. This behavior can lead to a decrease in your self-esteem, self-worth, and confidence as you become more focused on managing the manipulator's mood than on your own needs and well-being. It's critical to recognize that you deserve to feel safe and respected in any relationship, and you should never have to tolerate aggression in order to preserve it. Wait. Whoa. You may also notice that manipulative aggression often comes after periods of emotional calmness or even kindness. This love-bombing technique is designed to confuse you, making it harder to recognize the aggression as a pattern of behavior. The manipulator may be sweet and affectionate one moment and then suddenly shift to aggressive and controlling the next. This unpredictability makes it difficult to trust your instincts. When aggression does show up, recognize it immediately and don't allow yourself to be lulled into complacency by occasional moments of peace. In more extreme cases, aggressive manipulation may evolve into physical violence or threats of harm. If you are ever in danger of physical harm, it is crucial to seek help immediately. This could mean reaching out to law enforcement, getting in touch with a support group, or finding a safe place to stay. Physical aggression is a clear red flag, and no matter the relationship, you should never tolerate violence or the threat of violence under any circumstances. Remember, your safety and well-being are always the priority. It is also helpful to educate yourself about the signs of aggression and manipulation so that you can identify them earlier in the relationship. Aggressive manipulation often starts subtly, with small acts of intimidation or threats that gradually escalate over time. By recognizing these early signs, you can take proactive steps to protect yourself before the situation becomes more serious. For example, if someone frequently raises their voice or uses insults to get their way, it's important to acknowledge that this is a form of aggression and address it directly before it becomes a pattern. The longer you stay in a relationship characterized by aggression, the more it can chip away at your confidence and emotional stability. It can make you question your own perceptions, emotions, and decisions, leading to confusion and self-doubt. This is why it's critical to stay grounded in your own sense of self and be willing to leave when the situation becomes unsafe or manipulative. You are deserving of respect, safety, and kindness, and you should never feel obligated to tolerate aggression to maintain a relationship. In summary, when faced with overt aggression, your primary goal should be to protect yourself, emotionally, physically, and psychologically. Set clear boundaries, remove yourself from the situation if needed, and seek support from others. Aggression is never an acceptable tactic in any relationship, and it is essential to address it immediately to maintain your sense of self-worth and safety. By refusing to tolerate aggression, you take control of the relationship dynamic and ensure that you are not manipulated or intimidated by fear. The final and most important step in stopping manipulation is to set firm, clear, and consistent boundaries. Manipulators thrive when they sense vulnerability or the absence of clear limits. Boundaries represent your sense of self-respect, your personal values, and your commitment to protecting your well-being. Setting boundaries isn't just a defensive act. It's an assertion of your right to control your own life and decisions. When you fail to establish and enforce these boundaries, you unintentionally invite manipulation to take root. A manipulator will always test your boundaries, pushing against them to see how far they can go without facing consequences. They may try to make you feel guilty, question your decisions, or attempt to blur the lines between right and wrong. This is a deliberate attempt to create confusion and weaken your resolve. The key to breaking this cycle is consistency. You must be unwavering in your commitment to your boundaries, regardless of how much resistance you encounter. So, for example, if someone continuously interrupts you when you're speaking or disregards your need for personal space, it's essential to address it immediately. A simple, direct statement like, "I don't appreciate being interrupted," or "I need some personal space right now," is a way to communicate your boundary. By doing this, you're teaching the other person that these behaviors are unacceptable, and they will have to adjust accordingly. Setting boundaries requires a certain level of self-awareness. You need to know what is non-negotiable for you in a relationship. Whether it's your time, your energy, your emotional well-being, or your physical space, these elements are sacred, and you must protect them. The more clearly you understand your boundaries, the easier it is to enforce them in various situations. One of the most common challenges people face when setting boundaries is the fear of pushback or conflict. Many individuals fear that setting limits will cause tension or push the other person away. However, the reality is that by not setting boundaries, you're allowing the manipulator to control the dynamic of the relationship. A manipulator who is allowed to cross boundaries will never learn to respect you or your needs. This creates an unhealthy, one-sided relationship where you are constantly giving and they are constantly taking. Another challenge is the tendency to second-guess yourself or feel guilty when you assert your boundaries. Manipulators are experts at making you question your own needs and desires. They might tell you that you're being unreasonable or selfish, trying to make you feel as though your boundaries are an imposition on them. This tactic is designed to make you doubt yourself and back down. It's essential to recognize this for what it is: a manipulation strategy. Your boundaries are not selfish, they are necessary for your emotional, mental, and physical health. So you should never apologize for setting boundaries. It's important to understand that boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about taking responsibility for your own well-being. When you set boundaries, you're not demanding that others change. You're simply communicating what you need to feel respected and safe in the relationship. If the manipulator doesn't respect those boundaries, it's a clear sign that the relationship is not healthy and should be reevaluated. The effectiveness of boundaries lies in consistency. When you assert your boundaries, you must follow through with consequences if they are violated. For instance, if you've told someone not to raise their voice at you and they do it again, you must follow through with a consequence, such as removing yourself from the situation or ending the conversation. Boundaries lose their power if there are no consequences for crossing them. If you allow a boundary to be violated once and do nothing, you risk reinforcing the manipulator's belief that they can get away with it. The longer this goes unchecked, the more the manipulator will believe they can continue to push your limits without facing any real consequences. Separating it now causes you to feel reoffended. When setting boundaries, it's crucial to communicate them clearly and assertively. This means expressing your needs in a calm and direct way. The goal is to avoid being passive or aggressive, both of which can undermine the strength of your boundaries. Being passive can make your boundaries unclear, while being aggressive can escalate the situation. Instead, aim for a firm yet respectful tone. A statement like, "I need to finish this task before we talk," or "I'm not comfortable discussing this topic right now," clearly expresses your boundary without attacking the other person. It's also important to remember that setting boundaries doesn't mean you have to explain yourself. You are not obligated to justify your boundaries or provide an in-depth explanation as to why they exist. Your boundaries are valid simply because they are your personal needs. If the manipulator tries to pressure you into justifying your boundaries, resist the urge to do so. A simple, "I've already told you my needs, and that's all I'm going to say about it," should be enough. In situations where a manipulator is constantly testing your boundaries, it may be helpful to limit the amount of time you spend with them. A manipulator who has no respect for your boundaries will continue to drain your energy and emotional resources. Limiting your interactions with them is a way of protecting your well-being and preventing them from having a negative influence on your life. In relationships, whether personal or professional, it's important to remember that you cannot control the behavior of others. However, you do have control over how you respond. Setting and enforcing boundaries is your responsibility. By doing so, you are protecting yourself from manipulation, preserving your self-respect, and ensuring that your relationships are healthy and balanced. While setting boundaries can be challenging, especially if you're dealing with a manipulator who is accustomed to pushing you beyond your limits, it is an essential step in taking back control. It is an act of self-care and self-respect. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, and boundaries are the foundation of that respect. By setting clear and firm boundaries, you communicate to the manipulator that you will not tolerate manipulation, and you reinforce the idea that you are worthy of respect. Manipulators rely on your inability to set boundaries to thrive in a relationship. When you fail to set clear limits, they can dominate the dynamic, constantly taking advantage of you. But when you assert your boundaries, you stop the manipulation in its tracks. Boundaries are a powerful tool for protecting yourself, ensuring that you maintain your autonomy, your self-worth, and your sense of control in all your relationships. When you stand firm in your boundaries, you communicate that you value yourself enough to protect your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. This is the key to stopping manipulation and creating healthy, balanced relationships. Manipulation is a multifaceted challenge, but it is not something that is beyond your ability to address. The key to overcoming manipulation lies in recognizing the signs early, identifying the specific tactics being employed, and taking decisive action to protect yourself. Understanding that manipulation thrives in the shadows. When you are unaware, passive, or unwilling to address it is crucial, and remaining antiseptic. Your vulnerability depends on your vulnerability, your uncertainty, and your reluctance to assert yourself. When you allow yourself to be passive, you give the manipulator the space to continue their harmful tactics unchecked. This is why it's essential to be proactive. You cannot afford to sit back and hope the manipulation will stop on its own. Instead, you must take control of the situation by being aware of what is happening and by actively asserting your own needs and boundaries. The foundation of any healthy relationship, whether personal, professional, or social, must be built on mutual respect. Manipulation distorts this foundation by introducing control and coercion. It makes the relationship one-sided, where one party calls the shots, dictates the terms, and imposes their will on the other. This is a destructive dynamic that undermines trust and emotional safety. It creates an imbalance where one person's needs are always prioritized over the others. Recognizing manipulation is the first step in stopping it. Manipulative behaviors often appear subtle at first. They may seem like simple requests or concerns, but upon closer inspection, you'll realize they are designed to make you feel responsible for the manipulator's emotions or actions. The manipulator will use a variety of tactics: guilt, fear, projection, aggression, and others, to force you into compliance. These tactics are not always easy to spot, especially when they are wrapped in seemingly innocent or caring gestures. But once you become attuned to the signs, it becomes easier to identify and reject these behaviors. The next step is to identify the specific tactics being used. Manipulators are skilled at exploiting your emotions. They might use guilt to make you feel responsible for their well-being, or fear to make you believe you are in danger of losing something valuable. They may make you feel indispensable or project their own flaws onto you. Each of these tactics is designed to destabilize your confidence and make you question your decisions. Either understanding these strategies is essential for resisting them. Once you have recognized and identified the manipulation, the most critical step is to take action. This is where many people struggle, either because they are afraid of confrontation, unsure of how to respond, or simply too emotionally entangled in the situation. But taking action is non-negotiable if you want to break free from the manipulation. You must assert your boundaries and stand firm in your convictions. Setting clear, firm boundaries is one of the most effective ways to stop manipulation in its tracks. Boundaries are the lines you draw to protect your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. They are not just rules for the other person, they are commitments to yourself that you will not allow anyone to cross without consequences. The key to effective boundaries is consistency. When you assert your boundaries, you must enforce them. If someone attempts to push against them, you must stand firm and not allow them to manipulate you into doing things that go against your values or needs. For example, if someone uses guilt to try to control you, you need to recognize that you are not responsible for their emotional state. You are not required to sacrifice your own happiness or peace of mind to fulfill their demands. By refusing to accept the guilt and by asserting your own needs, you deny the manipulator the power to control you. Similarly, if a manipulator uses fear to keep you compliant, you must confront that fear head on. Fear is a powerful tool, but it only works if you allow it to. Fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of missing out. These are all tactics designed to manipulate you into making decisions out of emotional distress rather than rational thought. By recognizing fear for what it is, a tactic designed to manipulate your actions, you can take control and make decisions based on your principles, not your fear. Once you've set and enforced your boundaries, it's crucial to keep them intact no matter how much resistance you face. Manipulators will often test your boundaries, pushing against them to see if they can get away with crossing the line. This is where many people falter, as they may be tempted to give in to avoid conflict or discomfort. But the moment you back down, you open the door for the manipulator to regain control. The longer you allow your boundaries to be violated, the harder it becomes to regain control of the situation. Boundaries should be clear, consistent, and unwavering. They are not up for negotiation. When you set a boundary, you must stick to it, even if it means walking away from a situation, distancing yourself from a person, or letting go of a relationship that is unhealthy for you. Relationships should never be about sacrificing your needs or compromising your self-respect. They should be about mutual respect, understanding, and support. If someone is unwilling to respect your boundaries, it's time to reevaluate the relationship. Lastly, remember that setting boundaries and taking action against manipulation is not about controlling the other person. It's about protecting your own well-being. You are not responsible for changing the manipulator's behavior, but you are responsible for how you respond to it. Your actions should reflect your commitment to yourself and to maintaining a healthy, balanced life. When you assert your boundaries and stop tolerating manipulation, you communicate that you value yourself enough to stand up for your emotional, mental, and physical health. You reinforce the idea that healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, not on control. And while this process can be difficult, it is the only way to stop manipulation and create relationships that are truly fulfilling. In conclusion, manipulation is a destructive force in any relationship, but it is not insurmountable. By recognizing the signs, identifying the tactics, and taking proactive steps to assert your boundaries, you can break free from manipulation and protect your well-being. Relationships should be built on respect, not control. You deserve relationships where you are treated with the same level of care and respect that you offer others. So take action today to stop manipulation and take back control of your life.